Hi, hello, how are you? Welcome to my book channel. My name is Sophie. This is a new channel, as you guys know, so I wanted to catch you up onto what books I've been reading so far this year. So I thought I would tier rank the 22 books that I've read so far in 2024 purely based on vibes and vibes alone, as you should, And also so you guys can get just a hang of like the kind of books that I like to read and see if our tastes align, you know what I mean? I have 22 books. I have 5 tiers. The top one is God tier life-altering literature. The next one is could not put it down. Then fantastic writing but vibes. And I have a very specific book to put in this tier. Next is in hindsight incredibly mid, and then lastly is jail time. So have my laptop right here and let's just get started. I'm gonna be doing these in order of when I read them in the year. So starting out, the first book that I finished, I think on like January 4th or something like that, was Magnolia Parks by Daisy Hayes. I adored this series, okay? I'm not gonna talk about plot, but this is basically just a bunch of young adults slash teenager rich London socialites running around being messy, and it's just a really fun time. This plot is super fast paced and I really enjoyed it, so this definitely goes in could not put it down because this series is just super fun. Next, I read the first 3 books in the Mind series by St. Abbey. Now, I read the first 2, then I finished a different book, then I read the 3rd, but we'll just get them all done at once. So I read The Risk, Sidetracked, and then Scarlet Angel. This series I've actually read before, completely all the way through, and it's a fantastic series. Very much watch your trigger warnings with this one. It's about a serial killer and an FBI romance, and there's a lot of dark stuff in this book, but I wanted to reread it because there are like 5 very short, like 150 page books. Yeah, I reread it and I love them. They're really good. So honestly, these all also go into could not put it down OMG because they're just super fast paced. They're really short. They all have great cliffhangers, and the whole like thing with FBI and serial killer, like how could that not just be full of drama? You know what I mean? So in between those 3 books, I also finished The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. I started this book last December before Christmas, reading an audiobook, and then I came home for Christmas from college and I stopped reading it. So when I went back to college, I reminded myself that, oh yeah, I was reading that, so that's why I finished it in January. But this book was really good. Like, it was so well written. It was beautiful to listen to. The story itself is really good. I love the characters. I love the evil guy, the villain in this book. It's so good. But that being said, it's not my favorite book of all time. You know what I mean? Like, I really appreciate the writing, but it wasn't the most fun book to read. So this book is the one that I made this middle tier for, which is fantastic writing, but vibes are kind of, awesomely written. But I mean, I paused halfway through, so it couldn't have been that engaging for me to stop and not keep going. The next book I read was Shiver, which I talked about in my favorite books of all time video because this is a comfort read from like years and years ago, and it still is, and I reread it this year just because of that. So this book has to go into God tier life-altering literature. Not that this is really well written, because it's not. It's a YA book. It's an old book. I've read it so many times before. It's just a comfort read for me. But honestly, it does go into this tier nonetheless because it's just a really good book. Like, it means so much to me, and I reread it because it meant so much to me, and my sister actually read it with me for the first time this year, so it was really fun seeing her reaction to it. So yeah, I just love this series. I love Shiver. I need to continue the reread and read the next 2 books as well, honestly. Next, I read The Ever King by L.J. Andrews, and this one was a bit of a disappointment for me, unfortunately. It was a fun plot. It was very fast paced. It's a fantasy romance with a pirate and a princess, but towards the end of this book, it kind of went on dragged long. It got a little cringy. I got secondhand embarrassment at some parts. It just overall was a kind of a mid book, unfortunately, because I've heard people really rave about it, but for me it was a 3-star. So I'm gonna put this in hindsight. It was incredibly mid because it was a good book, but I'm not gonna read it again, and I'm also not gonna pick up the sequel. Whatever, but nothing crazy. Then I went on a fluffy contemporary romance binge, and I read like 4 really fluffy popular TikTok books like right in a row. So I read 2 books by Appy Jimenez, which is Part of Your World and Yours Truly, and I really loved these. These were so fast paced. I actually read Part of Your World, the first one, in less than 24 hours. I just like flew right through it. It's only like 400 pages, so it's not super long, but it's really engaging, and the characters are just so lovely in this book. I just love them. My main problem with both of these was they did have a 3rd act, either breakup or miscommunication plot that I really don't like. It's just a sloppy way to end a book, in my opinion. Like, if there is a 3rd act problem, I would rather it not be between the 2 characters, or rather it be some kind of external factor that they have to like overcome, rather than them just not being able to communicate, and that therefore causes them to break up for a couple chapters and just like waste my time. So these unfortunately were not 5-star books, but I do love Abby Jimenez's writing, so I'm gonna put both of these into could not put it down because it really just was that. It was really good, but I did have some small problems with it, you know? Next is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poshton, and this is a book about a girl who lives in an apartment that goes back 7 years so she can time travel while in that apartment, and she meets a guy from 7 years ago. So this has a lot of potential. It's like a magical realism book, and I liked the plot a lot, but unfortunately I just didn't love the book. It was really hard to pinpoint like what specifically I didn't like because the characters were nice enough, you know, they had a great relationship. There was a lot of other things in this book. It talks about like suicide and conversations like that I think are important and all that stuff, but it just didn't stick out to me, you know? It's like Abby, what's her face? Abby Lee's like pyramid.
And next, Kendall. You didn't stick out to me.
That was what this book was. So I have to put it in hindsight incredibly mid because it was another 3-star read for me. It was fine, but it wasn't great, you know? Lastly, to finish out my little fluffy contemporary romance binge, I read Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. And this book is basically just copy paste from Love Hypothesis. It's the 3rd book in that same series, and all of them are feminist STEM romances. I talked about this in my last video about book talk books that I liked, and I really loved Love Hypothesis. I gave it 4 stars, but this book and the one before it, Love on the Brain, I just gave 3 stars because it just was basically the same thing again, you know? I was like, be more creative, Ali. So, wait, I need to sneeze. Excuse me. Okay. But this one goes into incredibly mid in hindsight because if it was its own separate book, I would have really loved it. But because it was basically the same thing as the other two, I just couldn't give it the kudos it deserved because it's just the same thing over and over, you know? Now, Broken Rivalry I read next. Unfortunately, I really did not enjoy it. I thought it was really bad. I gave it 1 star because I actually DNF'd this one. This is my only DNF so far this year. Well, that's not true actually. Technically, I DNF'd Crescent City 2, House of Sky and Breath, but I'm gonna go back to it. It's not like an official DNF. It's just on pause right now, but I officially DNF'd Broken Rivalry. It was just written very badly. It was written very cringy. The smut was terrible. I also read smut in audiobook format, and that was the worst decision of my entire life. It was just overall really, really bad, and I was really sad about it. This one goes into jail time because it was my first DNF of the year. Usually, I'm not gonna get to the end of the book and rate it any lower than 2 stars because if I got to the end, that means that it's somewhat decent. Like, I'm not gonna finish a book that I hate. So if I give something 1 star, that's probably because I DNF'd it. And then if I finish a book but absolutely hate it, I'll probably still give it 2 stars because it had to give me something in order to finish it. So speaking of, we're actually gonna skip the next book and talk about Broken Whispers that I read after Daisy Hates, which is the next book. I actually finished this book, but I still really didn't like it. So this is a mafia romance, but it was just cringe, boring, nothing original. I hated the girl character, she was a wimp. I hated the guy character who was overprotective, like obsessively protective. It was gross. And the thing is, I can do with like protective hero stuff like that. This one pissed me off. I don't know what to tell you. It was bad. It was unoriginal, it was bad. So this one I finished, but I gave 2 stars. You see the difference where I DNF'd Broken Rivalry and gave 1 star. But either way, Broken Whispers is still going into jail time because these 2 books I read very close to each other and I gave them both very bad stars. So not good rating. However, before Broken Whispers, I did read Daisy Hates, which is book 2 of the Magnolia Park series that I started as my first book of the year. And this one, once again, was could not put it down OMG. This one I think is actually better than the first book for some reason. I just love Daisy more than I like Magnolia. She's just a better character in my opinion, more well-rounded. Magnolia can be a little bit of like a prissy little princess, whereas Daisy is more like grounded, I feel. I also loved Christian's point of view, and then her older brother Julian having a point of view in the story was also really cool because I love him as a character. So this one had very similar issues to book 1 in that the chemistry would kind of be iffy, and I'll talk about that in a future video when I finish the series, talk about them all as a whole. But yeah, although it wasn't a 5-star for me, super fun, super drama, loved the POVs. The audiobook for this was fantastic because the guy that talked for Christian had the most gorgeous accent in the entire world. Oh my god. So yeah, really, really good experience reading that book this year. Next is The Six Deaths of the Saint, and this is actually a very, very short book. This book is only 36 pages. Like actually, I read it within an hour and a half and it's so good. This was a 5-star book for me. Very surprising because it's 36 pages. Like what can an author write in that short amount of time to make me give it a 5-star rating? I don't know, you might just have to read it yourself. I think it's free on Kindle Unlimited, but this was just fantastic. It's a beautiful story. It's really well done. And one thing that I loved in this book is that the author used different point of views. Like she switched from first to second point of view, and I've never ever read a book in second point of view before besides like a cookbook, you know? So I'm gonna put this in fantastic writing, but vibes iffy, because this actually made me like almost cry. Like I think I shed a tear for this book, but it wasn't like a book that I'm gonna go pick up for a fun time. You know what I mean? Like it's a sad book, but it's really well written. But I did give it 5 stars. So don't just think that it's because it's in the middle, it was like a low rating. We're rating on vibes, remember? So I actually did give this 5 stars, but it just happens to be in the 3rd tier. The next book I read was Lotus by Jennifer Hartman. This is a book about a guy a boy who was kidnapped when he was very little, and then he was raised in like this bunker and he never left, and then he comes back to the real world and his childhood friend like sees him and they spark up a connection, a friendship, and then a romance. This is a very sweet book. I liked it. Really good story. But a couple instances in this book I got really bad secondhand embarrassment. And unfortunately that can turn me off of a book so fast. I understand that obviously he doesn't have the best social cues or social skills because he has been in a bunker his entire life, and this is definitely a very hard subject matter to tackle, so I do appreciate that. Overall, although it was a really sweet book, it's not something I'm gonna pick up again. So this is gonna go into, in hindsight, incredibly mid, just because it was a good book, but you know, that's just the long and short of it. Next, I read my first and only nonfiction so far this year because I actually had to read this for college. However, it was a book that I actually enjoyed. It wasn't like a textbook, and that is Why I Explain the Holocaust. So I read this for like the first 4 months of the year and finally finished it in April. And this was just a really well done book about the Holocaust. Peter Hayes, the historian who wrote it, is very knowledgeable about the subject, and he just explained a lot of things really well. I think if you're new to the Holocaust or want to learn a lot of new background information, this is a great book to start with because it just explains a lot of things that either you do know better or explains things that I've never heard of before about the Holocaust. It's very rich with information and knowledge, and I can definitely reference it for many classes in the future. So I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars. I am putting it in fantastic writing but vibes, because obviously this is a nonfiction book about the Holocaust, okay? Vibes were not there. Vibes are out the window, but fantastic writing, yes. Informational, yes. One of the best nonfictions that I've ever read. In my very short list of nonfiction books that I've read, I recommend this one. Only a few more left to go. Next, I read Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. This one is a fantasy between, or actually a romantasy between a soldier, a paladin, and then a girl named Grace who is a perfume maker. This I thought was going to be a lot different than it was. I thought it was going to be a lot of like mystery and like dark fantasy. This turned out to be more of a cozy fantasy with a whodunit plot in it. It was interesting, but once again, it wasn't my fave. It was a lot of secondhand embarrassment. That is like the key word of this video, but the books that do make me cringe, unfortunately, don't get high stars. Like, that's just how it works. I didn't love the characters. They were okay. They were both very softies at heart, but Grace especially, I think, could be a little dumb sometimes, and I don't like dumb people in my books, or at least like dumb main characters, because I'm in your head the entire time. Like, I don't want to act like I'm dumb because I'm reading your point of view, you know what I mean? Anyway, yeah, this is gonna go into, in hindsight, incredibly mid once again, because it was fine, but I'm not picking it up again, and I don't know if I'm gonna read more T. Kingfisher because I just don't think she's the kind of writer for me. Then I picked up Funny Story by Emily Henry, and if you watched my TikTok book video, the last one, I talked about Emily Henry for a hot second and how her books have really been hit or miss for me. This one, though, was a hit. I really liked this book. I thought that Miles was a character I didn't expect to like, but I really did like. Daphne, I could relate to a lot. I thought that their romance was well crafted. I think that Emily Henry can really create connection between two characters, and I really felt their friendship before they even like got together romantically, and I appreciated that. And also, this is more of like a literary fiction because there's a lot more to the plot than just romance. There's also problems with making friends, problems with finding out like who you are, especially like in your 20s, early 30s, family issues, those kinds of things. And overall, it's really good. So I'm giving this one, or I gave it 4 stars, and I'm gonna put it in could not put it down. It was better than just incredibly mid, and it did have fantastic writing, but it also had some vibes. You know, it was funny at some points. I liked it a lot. So yeah, I'm gonna put it in could not put it down. Next, I read what is probably going to be my favorite book of the entire year, what I talked about in a couple videos ago, and that is Manacled by Sen Lin Yu. This is a fan fiction between Draco and Hermione from Harry Potter. It's 1,000 pages. 1,000 pages of absolute masterpiece, actually. It's just fantastic. It's just that girl. She really is. I get goosebumps every time I talk about it. It's an incredibly sad book. It's an incredibly emotional book. It's an incredibly painful book to read, but it's also just a beautiful romance. And I will not go on and on about it because I did that in 2 videos ago, but let's just say this was God tier life altering literature. This is going to be my favorite book of the year. I'm predicting it right now. I don't think I can read anything better than this, honestly, this year. And it could stand out the test of time and just become my best standalone fiction I've ever read. The last series that I read this year, or most recently, was The Serpent and the Wings of Night series by Carissa Broadbent. I only read the first 2 books. I gave the first one 5 stars and the second one 4 stars. But honestly, and here's the thing, I don't give half stars. I feel like I need to be more decisive and just only give full stars. But Although I gave the first book 5 stars, it really is the epitome of a 4.5-star book to me. But I still gave it 5 stars because it was a really well-written fantasy. I thought the writing was great. I thought the characters are fantastic. Lots of banter, lots of fighting, lots of just really fun vampire fight to the death trial romance. Not anything too creative, but it was really well executed. The second book, however, was a lot more political, a little slower. Didn't love it so much as the first one, unfortunately. But I'm gonna put both of these into could not put it down, because although I did have some issues with it, it overall was a really good series, and I would recommend it 100% to fantasy readers. But I don't know if I'm gonna continue the series because the romance that was built between Rain and Aurea in this book finishes with the first 2, and then in the other series books it has different characters in their different romances, but I don't really think I care about those characters enough to read them. So for now we're just putting pause on this series, and we'll see if I come back to it, but no promises. Anyway, with that being said, these are the books that I've read so far this year. As of filming this, I actually just finished a different book, and I'm vlogging that process, and I'm in book 2 of the series right now. That vlog should be the next video coming out. It's a very popular series, I'll tell you that. The first book I gave 4 stars, I'll tell you that, and it was really good. So you will just have to wait until the next video to see what that series is and my thoughts on it. So if you are new here, subscribe so you won't miss when that video comes out. So yeah, let me know in the comments what you're reading, and I love you so much. Hope you have an amazing rest of your day, and I will see you for the vlog in just a couple days.